Hi friends, welcome back. In today's video, I'm going to take you through my early thoughts and setup plans for my 2024 home and garden planner. Like my last video, this one is going to be a longer, chatty planning session, so I invite you to grab a tea, coffee, or beverage of choice, a snack, some stationery supplies, and anything else that you will need to feel cozy. Full disclosure, I'm currently at my desk. I'm wrapped up in a warm blanket, and I've got an orange Pico tea beside me. It's a pretty gloomy day outside. I've got some cozy lighting on, and I hope you'll excuse the darker lighting, but hopefully it'll add to the overall cozy atmosphere of this planning session. Before we get started, I want to clarify that this video is going to be mainly focused on sharing my thought process for why I'm setting up this book in the first place and how I'm going to approach it. I definitely don't have all the details figured out, and I don't have really specific plans. I'm truly planning as I'm filming this video, so I'm looking at this as like an MVP or an early draft of how I think I'm going to approach my home and garden planner, and I'm looking forward to doing a recap at the end of the year to see how it goes. The most important context that you'll need to know right now is being structured or doing chores regularly does not come easily to me. I let chores pile up and it becomes a really overwhelming task, and then I just really dread doing it altogether. I do get things done, but I think I'm ready to take it to the next step, and I'm going to treat this home and garden planner as a personal project for next year to put a real effort into developing better habits around keeping up with maintaining our home. And that's one of the reasons actually why I'm keeping it in a separate book, because I had considered combining it with my meal planning, but I just got into a good groove with meal planning, and if I combine it with home and garden chores and tasks, I feel like I risk overwhelming myself. And so maybe there's a world in the future where this starts to feel like more of a habit and I don't need to put so much effort into building that habit, but we're going to treat 2024 as a building year in that regard, and I'm going to put an honest effort, and hopefully by the end of the year I'll be in a better spot than I'm in now. I am not coming at this from an expert perspective. I'm going to do my best to apply strategies that I have found have worked in other areas of my life, and I'm doing an experiment to see if it'll work in this setting. I will share my tentative plans, but I fully expect to iterate on this throughout the year. If there's interest, I will post updates along the way so you can learn from the many mistakes that I am sure I will make. Similar to my last video where I set up my health and wellness planner tracker, I used the same reflection questions to set some intentions and ensure that I was clear on what the intended outcomes were for setting up this planner. My first question really is like, what is the purpose of this book? And to answer that, I reflected on what my goals are with respect to maintaining our home and our garden, and how I want this book to support that. And so I would say I want to have a clean home and a well-maintained garden. And I also want to keep myself accountable to achieving that end state of having a clean home and a well-maintained garden using a method that I know works for me. So I've mentioned before in other videos that I have tried digital to-do lists, and I've just tried so many different methods, but for whatever reason right now, using a structured book or planner like the Hobonichi Weeks worked really well for me when it came to meal planning. I'm hoping that that will work for me when it comes to this personal project of maintaining our home and garden. What do I want this book to look like at the end of the year? I want to create a plan for what needs to get done around our home. And then I want to track when they get done so I can keep on top of things. What hasn't worked well in the past? There's a lack of schedule for when things need to be done. So a lot of the tasks that I do are very reactive. For example, we regularly turn on our dishwasher. We regularly do our laundry because those are things that impact us on a daily basis. And I guess it's very habitual at that point. But when it comes to things like mopping the floors or cleaning our windows, those things aren't scheduled in. And so they happen, but I couldn't tell you exactly how often, and I couldn't tell you when they happen. So it often feels like we'll hit a weekend and we'll say, oh, let's make it a cleaning day, and then we'll just do as much as we can in that day. And I don't think that that is great. Another thing that hasn't worked well is I just don't know what to do. So I kind of touched on this just now, but aside from obvious things like doing the dishes, there are other tasks that just aren't obvious to me, and I would like to be proactive about knowing generally when things should be done and setting aside time to do them. The last thing is I leave everything to the last minute, or if it's an emergency. So either I will have like a designated cleaning day where I will try to do as much cleaning as possible in that day. And it feels overwhelming because it's a lot of things in one day. The other time this happens is when we have emergencies. So if we're having friends over for dinner, or when we have family coming to visit and stay with us, that's when we'll do a really deep clean. And ideally, we're not waiting for those emergencies to do these deep cleans. My ideal scenario is we're maintaining this throughout the year. So when company comes, it's not such a heavy lift when we need to get our home ready. What are some potential blockers? Well, when I get into the situation of having too many things to do and letting them pile up, I end up with these humongous lists of things to do, and it feels overwhelming. So I'm trying to do too much, and then I get overwhelmed. I also have a lack of motivation. So I'm not proud of this, for the record, but I find chores extremely boring. And I think where some people can power through it and accept that it's something that needs to be done, I really struggle with this. So that's a blocker. Also, just not knowing what to do. So when I was getting into the habit of meal planning regularly, I was getting stuck on not knowing what to cook. So it wasn't so much that I wasn't willing to dedicate time during the week to cook dinners, but the thought of trying to figure out what to make for dinner and therefore what we would need to buy at the grocery store, all of that really overwhelmed me and I wouldn't plan for it. And so then we'd end up going to the grocery store without a plan, and we'd just buy what we felt would make sense to have in our fridge. And it worked to an extent, but then without that plan, we would just spend a lot of time discussing what we wanted to make based on the ingredients we had, and it was just a very inefficient process. And so I think I'm running into the same issue here in that I kind of know I want to have a clean house. I kind of know in order to do that, there are certain tasks like vacuuming the floor or mopping the floor or changing the bed sheets and doing all those things that you would need to have a clean home. But I just don't have a solid plan for it, so I'm kind of spending a lot of time overthinking it and getting overwhelmed. So not knowing what to do is a major blocker for me. What are some ways that I can overcome these blockers or set myself up for success? This one was a really helpful question for me to think through. I think I need to shift my mindset around getting chores done. When I leave things to the last minute and feel overwhelmed because I have to do too much, when I'm already unmotivated to do this task in the first place, even though I know it needs to be done, And when I kind of have no idea where to start, it just feels like too much, and then I don't want to do it. When it comes to how I might shift my mindset, I have a few ideas that I'm going to try to adopt. So the first one is I'm going to try treating chores like it's a job. And what I mean by that is I'm going to create structure. I'm going to try not to get too emotional about it. And I'm also going to try to reward myself and do what I can to keep myself engaged, even though it's still a job. So for example, the way I'm gonna try to make it a little bit fun is I'm going to reward myself when I complete chores. So rewarding myself is buying this beautiful Hobonichi Weeks and being able to track the things that I need to do with pens that I like using, on paper that I love writing on, and being able to check off things when they're done. I'm also going to keep this project of keeping our home clean, or however you want to call it, I need to keep it flexible. I want to have a loose plan in place on when they need to be done instead of being rigid about it. And I also need to be willing to collaborate with my husband. So he is very much all about digitizing tasks, and we do have a Notion that we keep for the two of us. He works really well with it, and we've been experimenting with setting up the roadmap for the two of us to keep track of larger projects around the home that we want to get done together. And I don't want to say, oh no, just because digital doesn't work for me in getting things done, no, I'm not going to use it at all. So instead, I'm going to try to complement that by working with him on keeping everything centralized in our digital Notion board, but keeping track of tasks that impact me. So we might decide on a project and document details about it on our Notion board, but then if there's certain things that I need to do with respect to that, then I will be tracking them in this book. Or if I'm doing research, I might use my notes pages to document some of that, but then I might transfer things that I want to remember beyond 2024 into our shared Notion board. So being willing to collaborate and be flexible about the approach that is going to work for both myself, but also my partner. And then I also want to break things down into smaller, more manageable tasks. So I know this seems pretty obvious, but it's all, I kind of have to repeat it for the benefit of myself. Instead of saying something like, hey, we need to vacuum the entire house, I want to break it down into manageable tasks depending on my schedule for the day. So I may not feel like I have time to vacuum the entire house, but maybe I'll feel like I can vacuum the living room floor over my lunch break. Or maybe I'll feel like I can do just the sofa on the weekend. So even if the task of vacuuming is something that we want to do on a regular basis, just breaking that down into even smaller tasks so that I can have that satisfaction of getting something done and feeling accomplished. Now that we've gone through what I am hoping for this book, let's dive into this book. So, before we get into what I'm actually planning on tracking, in case you are new to the Hobonichi Weeks, I'm just going to go through a really quick overview of what's inside here. And if you are aware and you don't really care for the refresher, then I will put a timestamp so you can skip past this. So this is the 2024 Tomitaro Makino Shihai Sumayer. I apologize if my pronunciation is off. I absolutely love this book. This is what it looks like. So it's got a beige section here for this botanical drawing by Tomitaro Makino, and then this cream section on the other side of the back. There's a little bit of silver foiling on the 2024. So when you open it up, you've got this yearly calendar overview. You have the current year, the previous year, and next year, the upcoming year. And then you have some space for important dates. And then you go into this yearly tracker or annual tracker. Not a lot of space, but essentially you've got your 12 months from January to December, and then you have a cell in this table, one for every day of the month. And then we go into the monthly layout. So it starts in December of 2023, actually November 27th, really, if you wanted. And you get up until March of 2025. And then you've got a little bit of space on the left side and at the bottom of the calendar. And then on bottom right hand page of the monthly calendars, you have a couple of check boxes, which I guess you could use for a checklist if you wanted. After the monthlies, it goes into the weekly views, and that starts in the final week of November. So we've got November 27th to December 3rd. And then you've got the weeklies on the left-hand side, and on the right-hand side, you have a blank page for additional notes, which I love. Weeklies go right up until the end of the first week of January 2025. You also have a weekly quote at the bottom. This is the English version. So if you had the Japanese version, this would be in Japanese. And then you also have a calendar view with the week that is currently being represented on the page circled. And then when you turn the page, you've got some useful abbreviations. And then you have your notes section. Here on the title page for the notes, you have an option to write down specific pages and subjects, which is great because the notes section is actually numbered. It goes up to 73 pages, and then you have a few additional pages. So there's a page that allows you to use things around you to measure size. There's a favorites page. And then you've got the My 100, which is a list of 100 things that you can make note of, an interview with yourself, some seasonal sweets to make at home, 35 days checkoff sheet, and addresses. And then at the back, you also get a little card that talks about Tomataro Makino. And then you have a sticker pocket. In my meal planning Hobonichi, I stuck it in the back, and then I just put a bunch of stickers here. So I'll probably do something similar. I'm not sure whether I'll put the pocket in the back or in the front, but I found that to be a nice addition. So that is the book. Now that we have a sense of the different sections, I'm now gonna start answering questions like, what do I want to track? How often do I want to track these things? How often will I want to reflect on and maybe identify trends and themes if that's something I even want to do? And how much time am I willing to dedicate to this? So to answer those questions, I'm gonna take a couple of notes, and then we'll use those notes to organize our setup here. In my last video where I set up my health and wellness tracker, I had a much more solid idea of all the different things that I wanted to track. And that was easier to do because it only concerned me, and I was basing a lot of the things that I wanted to track off of my self-care plan. So in this case, I've already said at the beginning of the video that this does not come naturally to me, and generating all of the different things that we need to do around our home is a shared thing that I'm going to have to do with my husband. So what do I need to track? There are two things that I know for sure that I want to track: recurring tasks. The other is standalone projects. I think it's important to distinguish between these two because I consider recurring tasks and chores, I consider recurring chores to be things that we know we need to do regardless of the year, but at different intervals. So an example would be vacuuming. That is something that I know we are going to need to do on a regular basis, and what we're going to need to figure out is how often, because right now vacuuming kind of happens all the time and quite often, but I would like to have a little more awareness around when we're doing it and what we're doing, because something like the floor gets vacuumed a lot more frequently than the sofa or our dining chairs. So knowing the frequency that they need to be done is going to help me determine which ones I'm going to take on in a given week. Standalone projects are things that are kind of contained within that project. So an example of that might be painting the bedroom. So I recently painted our bedroom with India Yellow by Farrow and Ball. If you're interested in seeing how that came out, I've got a video for that I'll link below. That was a pretty big project that took multiple days and had multiple steps that I needed to keep track of. But once the project was done, I didn't need to really think about those tasks ever again, unless I was doing another project where it would be helpful to refer back to the things that I did. I want to be able to, in this book, plan for bigger projects that are standalone, and also be able to plan out the different steps that I'm doing and track them as they are completed, so that I have a historical record of them in case I need to refer back to it, and also just to keep me on track when I'm in the middle of the project. So those are the two main things that I really want to track. In terms of what belongs in here, household chores, gardening. I had considered making this just dedicated for gardening, but because gardening is something that we only really do in the spring and summer, because we live in a cold climate and everything dies in the winter, I didn't want to dedicate a standalone book for it. So what I want to do in terms of gardening is I want to keep track of, I guess gardening almost could be seen as like a standalone project. An example of that would be noting down when we want to start germinating seeds in the spring so that they're ready to be planted outdoors in the summer. And also just documenting our learnings, because we are very beginner gardeners, and each year we try to enhance our garden a little bit more. Yeah, I really want to use this as a place to track and document all of those things so that we have a record that we can refer to in the future. So some other standalone projects are decluttering, bathroom painting. I want to have a place where I can log all of the upcoming projects that I want to do. So I'm going to make a label for project logs. This is looking a little messy, but I just want to keep it real with you. Okay, so full disclosure, I took a little bit of a break to think through what I thought would be the most helpful. And I think I'm going to start with anything that comes to mind that I think I want in this book. And it's not necessarily going to have all the detail that will eventually live in here, but at least it'll give me a sense of what things I'm going to want to be putting in here. I'm also going to put down projects that I know I have in mind that I want to complete in 2024 and beyond. And it's not that I'm necessarily going to commit to doing all of those projects, but I think having a place to have it all written down will be helpful when I finish one and I want to start planning like future projects. So for example, I already have paint that I know I want to use for painting our bathroom. So that's going to be a project at some point. I also have plans to paint office. So I also have already purchased paint for the office, so that is coming up. We also have the front stairway. For now, these are pretty broad, but there's actually a lot of little things that I'll be doing, but for now I'm just gonna keep them as broad categories. What else? Bedroom. Okay, so I think this is as far as I'm gonna get for now, but I'll explain where I'm going with this. This is kind of incomplete because it does require me to work with Mike to figure out the bigger picture for our home. So this is really mostly just going to be for me to keep myself accountable and to build some habits to getting things done throughout the year. In terms of what I'm thinking, I don't really have any solid ideas for this layout here, so I'm going to leave this for now. I also don't have any strong opinions on what I would want to track here, so I'm also going to leave this. But if you have any ideas or suggestions, feel free to let me know. So in the monthlies, I think this is where I'm going to be mostly focused on planning. So this is where I might note down the focus for the month. So I'll actually make a label for that. So I'll say like project focus. The intention here is to say, okay, you only have so much time in a month. You have so much going on in your life. What are one or two things that you can really focus on getting accomplished in this month? So for December, let's just say that one thing was office. January's focus could be the bedroom closet. I've worked on updating the main part of our bedroom, but I also want to update our bedroom closet and add more shelving and decorate it, things like that. And then perhaps in the spring, when we get closer to the summer, maybe in March or April, the main focus could be gardening. So the idea for using the monthlies is I will set an intention for the main standalone project that I want to achieve that month. And also I might outline events that are worth noting. So let's say like a plumber is coming over. That's what I'll be tracking here. So project focus, events related to the home. Okay, so that'll be the monthly, and I might add to that, but that's what I've got for now. In the weekly, so I'm also going to use the weeks for planning household chores. So similarly to the way I approach meal planning, my idea is I'm going to have a list in the back of all the things that need to get done, and then I'm going to slot in the chores that I think I'm going to get done during this week. It might happen on the side here, it might happen here, but the idea is that I will be able to get a sense of the regular recurring chores that need to get done. I'm also going to track. So this is where when I get the chores that I intend to get done, this is going to be the place where I can, check the box and reward myself for a job well done. So that's going to be the primary focus of the weekly. And then, of course, if I need this space for taking notes, depending on what happens during the week, this is the place that I would do it. So I might as well add a sticky for, I'll just call it miscellaneous notes. As an example, let's say a plumber comes over and gives us a quote on an issue that we're experiencing. Then I might put in the monthly the date that the plumber came over, and then in the weekly here I'll add the detail. Event in the monthly and detail in the weekly. So I do want to keep the notes page relatively blank just in case I need it for detailed notes. And then if it stays blank, maybe I'll decorate. And then we get to our notes pages. So this is where I'm going to keep like a task list. So I have here recurring chores. I'm going to add in task list. So I don't necessarily know exactly how this is going to look, but what I want it to do is I want it to have a list of all of the chores or tasks that we would need to do on a regular basis. And I want to categorize it somehow by frequency. So something like vacuuming different areas might be in like a very often kind of category, and then maybe there'll be another category like seasonal things. So those kinds of tasks that don't happen on a regular basis. And what I can't decide right now is whether we will be organizing it or categorizing it by like type of task, like vacuum, or if it'll be by room. So kitchen, living room, office. I'm not sure yet. And then the idea is that I'll always have like this reference to plan my week. So if I see on this list, we have like a bunch of vacuuming to do, and I might be able to see in the past 2 weeks, I managed to vacuum these different areas. So now in the next 2 weeks, I'll probably want to tackle these other areas that are listed here. So that's the idea. I'm very open to being wrong about this and iterating along the way. I'm also going to have like project log. So we have a section for recurring chores that we know we're going to need to do frequently throughout the year and beyond. And then here are the standalone projects. So this is where I will be putting all of the different ideas that I have in mind for 2024 and beyond. This is kind of, I would love to get all of these things done because, of course, I love to overcommit myself. So I think part of this exercise is actually going to be like recognizing that I can probably only do 1 or 2 things a month. The idea is that I'll have the type of project and then maybe I'll put like a start and completion date. I'm thinking maybe something really simple like that. And then for each of these individual projects, when I am getting ready to start them, I'll use these pages to plan out, the different steps that I think need to happen, in what order, and when they get accomplished. So I don't know. I hope this will be enough notes pages for project planning. If I run out of room, maybe I'll get one of the week supplement notebooks to finish off the year. And then if I really like this approach, I will consider getting a mega for next year. Or maybe this will remain relatively blank, but I don't want to make too many plans for the note pages so that I can leave enough space for planning out projects. So I think that's pretty much everything that I've got planned for how I'm going to use this. It is pretty simple, but because I think this is going to be a challenge for me, I really need to take baby steps and try not to overextend myself. And so I think this is a good start, and as time goes on, I can add to it or take things away if they're not working. So earlier I mentioned some of my potential blockers were that I tend to try to do too much. I have a lack of motivation and I don't always know what to do. And so by putting all of the projects that I want to do on a list and trying to limit how many I commit to in a month, I think that will help with not trying to do too many things all at once. Having this book to write in and track in, I think will be really fun because I adore Hobonichi Weeks, and I'm just so excited to use this book in the new year. And having a plan is going to help me with the blocker of not knowing what to do. So having a recurring list of chores is going to take a lot of work, I think, for us to figure out. But once that heavy lifting is done, I'm hoping that this will over time be second nature, and I won't need to put so much mental energy into figuring out what needs to be done because all that thinking will be done. And then it'll just be a matter of tracking when they're done so that I can be a bit more aware and keep up with it. And in terms of whether I want to identify trends or themes, I don't think I'm so concerned about trends and themes. If anything, maybe I can make a mental note of tasks that I struggle more with, and then I can try to create strategies to figure out how I can motivate myself to do them. And how much time am I willing to dedicate to this? I think I'm going to be spending quite a bit of time setting up this chores list. That part is going to take a while, but in terms of updating and tracking, I hope it's like a 10 to 15 minute average per day. And I think I'm going to approach this in 1 or 2 week sprints. So I'll probably take a look at my task list 2 weeks at a time and just roughly plan out what needs to happen either in the current week or the upcoming week. And then it'll just be up to me to get them done within that 2 week period. 2 weeks seems to be a pretty good span of time for me to have that flexibility to work around my schedule and get things done without leaving it so unstructured that I say, well, it just gets done when it gets done. All right, so we are coming to the end of the video, and I wanted to do a quick recap on where we are at so far in terms of how I'm planning on using this Hobonichi Weeks as a home and garden planner for 2024. And my hope is that this book is going to help me have a clean and well-maintained home and garden, and it'll keep me accountable for getting things done around the house. Opening it up, so we've got the yearly overview, and I admit I don't know exactly what I'm going to do with this page just yet, but if you have any ideas, I would love to hear them. So please let me know in the comments if you have any ideas on how I can use this page. For the yearly overview, annual tracker, I'm not really sure what this is called. I also don't know yet how I'm going to use this page, but one idea that I have is to track large projects, just to celebrate the things that I get accomplished, because sometimes I forget what I have done around the home during the year, and I think it could be a good place to look to, but I'm very open to ideas here. So if you have any ideas, please feel free to leave that in the comments below as well. For the monthlies, I'm going to be using it to plan in advance things that I want to get accomplished for that month. I'm also going to set a project focus in the month so that I can stay on track and not get too distracted and impulsive about starting multiple different projects that end up staying half finished. Sorry, Mike. And also recording key events related to our home. So for example, if plumber comes by, noting that down, and then adding more detail about the visit and anything we need to keep in mind in the note section of the weekly. And then in the weekly, this will also be a place to plan in 1 to 2 week sprints for different chores that I plan to get done around the house. I'm also going to be using it to track when I get those chores done, and this will also be a way for me to pat myself on the back for a job well done. And then also miscellaneous notes. So that example before of an event that I might want to add more detail to, this is the space that I'll be doing it in. And then we have the notes section, and the first thing that I am going to be focused on sorting out is our recurring task list. These will be all the tasks that we'll have to be doing around the house throughout the year. Anything that needs to happen to keep our house well maintained and running smoothly. That is something that Mike and I will take some time to sort out. If you're interested in seeing what our list looks like in the end, I'll be happy to share an update. And if you have a list that you would like to share with me, please feel free. I would love to see how you approach this kind of thing, because I'm looking forward to doing the work at getting it set up, and I'm hoping every time after that will not be as much of a heavy lift. I'll also have a standalone project log. So this is where I will put down all of the different larger projects that Mike and I want to tackle. And this is just a place where we will note it down and make sure that we stay aware of it. And when it comes time to figuring out what we think we can achieve in a given month, whenever we sit down to do that planning, I'll be able to draw from this list just to make sure that we stay on track with the things that we already know we want to get done. So I already know, for example, gardening is something that I'm going to want to start focusing on in the springtime. And so I will make sure that this is a project that we tackle probably in March or April of this year. I'll have to do a little bit of research on that, but that's exactly what this book is going to be for. And then the remaining pages, I want to keep fairly flexible for research and notes related to projects around the home. And so gardening is a perfect example of writing down all of the things that we're hoping to grow this year and noting down the different dates that we should start germinating the seeds. So this is where I'll probably do the planning for it, and then I'll start to note down the important dates in the monthly, and then those will make their way over to the weeklies when I sit down and make my weekly plan. Same goes for something like doing an office makeover. So I'll probably list down all of the different tasks that I think will need to happen in order to get the makeover done. And if there are any additional notes that I want to take related to that or any additional research that I might need to do, I will try to note it down in here so that I have a historical record of it and something that I can reference in the future if I were to start a project that has similar steps. So that is all that I have for you today. I know I kept it pretty simple, but given that this is an area that I feel the least confident in, I know that any step, even if it's a small one, is going to be better than whatever I've been doing in the past. So I would love to hear from you in the comments down below. So yeah, let me know how you approach chores around the house, what your mindset is around that, and if you do have a planner or a book, I'd love to know how you've been approaching it. And in the new year, I will update you all on how things are going with this book, any changes that I've made after using it for a little while. And I'm really viewing this as like a personal project, which is why I think keeping it in a standalone book is perfect for keeping me focused on this project. And I'm really excited to see how things go. If you're still here, I know this was a long one. Thank you so much for sticking around and being here with me today. I hope you're doing well and getting as excited about 2024 as I am, and I will see you in the next one. Bye!